He scored a 0 on his exam, yet was sought after by Harvard and Yale, all because he was the young heir to a Korean conglomerate. In order to reward Brown for successfully gaining admission to the top university, his grandfather gave him a $24 billion gift. Brown was so excited when he saw the pile of cash that he was trembling with excitement, but the money was rightfully his to begin with. At that time, he had been reborn in 1987 and had saved his grandfather, who was supposed to die in a plane crash. When his grandfather wanted to reward him with some pocket money, he refused and instead asked for a piece of remote land. 9 years had passed, and the once remote location had become a city, looking out at everything from a tall building. His grandfather asked him if he had foreseen the development of this place. Was his vision unique, or could he truly predict the future? Of course, Brown didn't tell his grandfather that he really could see the future. When he learned that his grandfather had given him $24 billion, his cousins and uncles were jealous to the point of madness, but Brown paid no attention to them, because his goal was to seize control of the group from his uncle. He wanted to make his grandfather believe even more in his abilities. The opportunity was coming soon. It was now 1996, and Titanic, which had a global box office of $2.412 trillion, was about to be released. However, no one believed in this movie. Brown found his father and urged him to bring the film to Korea. It was guaranteed to make a lot of money. Like everyone else, his father didn't think Titanic would do well at the box office. But a few years earlier, Brown had convinced him to bring in the Hollywood film Home Alone, which nobody thought would be successful. In the end, the global box office reached $670 billion, and his father's film company became famous in Korea. His father agreed, and on the day Titanic was released, the theater was packed. At that moment, Brown suddenly saw someone who also believed that Titanic would become a classic in the film industry. He looked familiar. When he got home that night and checked, he found out that the guy's name was Musk. In 20 years, he would become the richest man in the country, but at that time, he was just a somewhat famous investor. He secretly followed the guy to Wall Street in the United States, but the guy treated him like a little kid and didn't want to talk to him at all. But a few minutes later, Brown would make the guy treat him like a god, because Brown saw a chess championship being held on TV, where the world chess champion was playing against IBM's robot. He had watched this game in his past life and knew the result. He turned to Musk and asked who he thought would win. If the robot won, IBM's stock value would skyrocket, and investing now would yield the greatest returns. Like everyone else, Musk thought the human would win, but Brown told him that the robot would win. Musk thought Brown was crazy and ignored him. Brown walked away, and suddenly the TV announced that the robot had won the game. Musk was stunned. It was the first time that a supercomputer had beaten a human. He rushed out to find Brown, but he was gone. Brown suddenly appeared in front of him, and Musk wanted to know how Brown had guessed correctly. Of course, Brown couldn't tell him that he could see the future, so he made up a reason and fooled him. His goal had been achieved, and he invited Musk to become his partner. But if Musk wanted to work with him, he would need some capital. Brown immediately said he had plenty of money. However, something happened to his family's conglomerate at that moment. But for Brown, it was an opportunity to take control of the conglomerate. But the bad news was that his betrayal of his conglomerate grandfather was discovered, because his grandfather wanted to buy a steel mill. But Brown, together with the richest man from his past life, Musk, wanted to preemptively buy the steel mill. They didn't expect to be followed by his uncle's men, who took a photo of Brown meeting with Musk. His uncle was pleased and said, "You dare to compete for control of the conglomerate." His grandfather saw the list of companies interested in buying the steel mill on TV and saw Musk's PS investment company listed, along with rival conglomerates. His uncle gave the photo to his grandfather's secretary, and his grandfather couldn't believe it when he saw the picture. He hinted to Brown and asked him if he knew how he had gotten to his current position. Brown seemed to realize something, but still held on to the hope that he could get away with it. His grandfather then asked him about the $2.4 billion one he had given him. He heard that Brown had exchanged it for dollars. "Where did you spend it?" Brown said he had given it to his father to invest in movies. His grandfather's expression turned sour. "I thought I had a good grandson, but apparently not. Like father, like son." Brown became anxious and turned to Musk, hoping to increase their investment and quickly finalize the deal. However, he did not realize that his grandfather had placed a listening device on the flower basket in front of him, and had heard all of their conversations. His grandfather put down his glasses with a cold expression. In the end, his trusted grandson had betrayed him. When Musk left the hotel, his grandfather's men immediately called him over and asked if it was really Brown who had invested in their company. Musk told his grandfather that Brown had indeed given them money, but it wasn't for buying the steel mill. He had invested in a small company called Amazon, and the returns had already increased by 900%. His grandfather was skeptical, but Musk warned him that he should be more worried about his son than his doubtful grandson. It turned out that his uncle had also betrayed his grandfather by investing a large sum of money in a rival conglomerate, which allowed them to compete with his grandfather. His grandfather was so angry that he sat there in silence. Meanwhile, his uncle was still signing contracts with the rival conglomerate's chairman, feeling very pleased with himself. In the end, his grandfather's conglomerate won the steel mill, but the price had risen from 300 billion won to 700 billion won, which had tricked his father and older brother. His uncle was very pleased, but his older brother told him that their father knew what he had done. His uncle's face immediately changed. changed, and he couldn't even lift his head during dinner. This time, his plan to manipulate Brown failed, and he lost control of the entire conglomerate. It turned out Brown had already noticed someone was following him, and he had discovered his grandfather's listening device. He had never really wanted to buy the steel mill. He had a different purpose. Soon after, Korea entered a financial crisis, and countless companies went bankrupt. The conglomerate, which had bought the steel mill, was also in crisis. This was Brown's goal, as he knew that only when the conglomerate was in crisis would he have an opportunity. In the elevator, Brown felt that the woman in front of him looked familiar. Suddenly, the woman turned around and greeted him, and Brown realized that she was the wife of his cousin from his past life. Their families had just arranged their engagement. Brown looked at the woman mysteriously, making her feel a bit embarrassed. He slowly walked over and stood close to her, making her heart beat faster. But then he pulled off the price tag from her clothes from behind, and the woman realized that she had misunderstood him. However, Brown's teasing had successfully made her fall for him. The woman went to her father and told him that she was there to meet her fiancé, Brown's cousin. It was an alliance between two conglomerates, and her grandfather was very pleased with his granddaughter-in-law. He asked his great-grandson, Phil, to come over. In their past life, Brown and the woman had successfully become a couple, but with Brown's teasing, who knows what might happen in the future. Brown walked over and saw his cousin. He immediately remembered how he had been bullied by him in his past life, and he was determined to step on him this time around. The woman kept asking her grandfather about Brown on their way back home. She found out that Brown had entered Seoul National University's law school with the highest score in the country. When he was a child, he and his grandfather had taken a piece of barren land, and as he grew up, he developed it and made tens of billions of dollars. Thinking about Brown's teasing earlier, she became even more infatuated with him and thought that her fiancé, Phil, was useless. The next day, she brought a stack of newspapers to Brown, who was still a student, claiming that she had helped his grandfather solve a big problem. She had leaked the news that the American PS company was interested in acquiring the national enterprise, Kia Motors, which helped Brown's grandfather successfully acquire Kia Motors. However, she did not know that Brown was the owner of the PS company. Brown quickly found his partner, Musk, and asked him to help him acquire Kia Motors. Musk was very puzzled and asked why he wanted to go against his grandfather. Brown told Musk that his grandfather intended to kick all the employees out of Kia Motors after he acquired the bankrupt company. Musk was very angry and asked Brown if he was a savior. However, Musk did not know that Brown's father in his past life was once an employee of Kia Motors who was laid off. When they protested, they were brutally beaten by the opposing company, and his mother was so scared that she fainted and lost her life. Brown could not accept that such a tragedy would happen again in this life. In the end, he managed to convince Musk to help him. Musk approached Brown's grandfather and began negotiations. The PS company offered a large amount of funding to invest in his grandfather's conglomerate, allowing him to snatch Kia Motors from other conglomerates. The condition was that they would retain 17% of the shares and keep the employees. His grandfather had no choice but to agree, as the conglomerate had little funds left. In the end, the conglomerate successfully acquired Kia Motors and became the top car manufacturer in Korea. Brown's grandfather announced that all employees would be retained, and when his father and his colleagues saw this on TV, they jumped for joy. They could finally earn enough money to support their families. That night, Brown brought a document to his past life's family home. He had secretly bought the landlord's shop and planned to give it to his mother. But suddenly, he froze. He saw a white lantern hanging outside their home. He pushed open the door and saw his mother's portrait on the table. Brown could not believe it. Had history not changed at all?
Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.